Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and this evening we're going to take another look at the march or the campaign that will eventually lead to the Battle of Worcester that will be fought on the 3rd of September 1651. And obviously today's date is the 16th of August, so you're probably already wondering what was happening today back in 1651. And the interesting thing is there is quite a decisive action, shall we say, that takes place today. So just like Ian, when he did his videos on the Battle of Waterloo, and in particular when he took a look at Hougoumont and also the defence of Le Haye-Saint, what we're going to do is use our whiteboard, and what I've done is already drawn up a map on it for an engagement that takes place at Warrington. So on the 16th of August 1651, the Royalist army, who had been forced to travel down the west coast well away from London, remember they left Stirling on the 31st of July, they crossed the border into England at Carlisle, and they're well into England at this very point. So they have made it through Lancashire. In a way, they were actually, or shall we say, Charles was declared king in Lancaster itself. But the interesting thing is he's now on the border between Lancashire and Cheshire, and that's where Warrington is. But you have to also remember is Oliver Cromwell is leading the New Model Army, and they're staying on the London side. In other words, they're staying on the east coastline. But also note that Lambert has 4,000 cavalry and is shadowing the Royalist army as they move south, and they've also got a huge force of militias coming together in the north, ready for Cromwell to unleash them with his New Model Army when the time is right. So on the 16th of August 1651, there was an action, there was an engagement, and as I said, we have here my little whiteboard that I've drawn up a map on. So I've just added at the bottom there, Warrington, 16th of August 1651, and in particular this is the battlefield at around about midday. The north is at the top of the board, so that's the north, and obviously the south is going towards the bottom. And here, running through the middle of our map, is the River Mersey, and obviously that's flowing out into the sea. And in a way, that's almost the border between Lancashire and Cheshire. This settlement, and bear in mind this has only been stylised with its little blocks, is a representation of Warrington itself. Obviously today Warrington is much bigger, and in particular has several bridging points going across, whereas at the time there was just one bridge crossing the river at Warrington, and a collection of houses, because all it was really was a market town. It wasn't a big place, like I said, as it is today. The road running from top to bottom is technically the road that Charles is on, really. He's following it down. Now, the Royalist army was coming from the north, obviously, and amazingly, Lambert, who had been shadowing the Royalists, had managed to get in front of Charles, which was really against the advice of Oliver Cromwell, because Oliver Cromwell wanted to shadow him and not to engage. And amazingly, he's got round in front of the Royalist army and is basically blocking the road to the south, basically. So Lambert's decided, well, the militias are on their way. There's also the Cheshire militia that's in the area anyway, so we might as well have a pop at the Royalist force. So Lambert's drawn his main body up across the road just to prevent any force from escaping, and the Cheshire militia was given the job of holding the bridge. Hold the bridge at all costs. And then if the bridge is taken, which is likely to be done at some point in the battle, then Lambert's force and maybe even the other militias that are on their way will be able to fight them off. So hopefully the battle will be fought on the 16th of August at Warrington, and that'll be the end of the Royalist cause. But obviously Oliver Cromwell is way over to the east, and obviously it will not be very happy with what's going on over here. So we have here these two big blocks, are the main royalist army, the main Scottish invading army. So they're moving south, and obviously what happened is the royalists sent a small body, an advance party, to enter the town. Now we know at around about midday those royalist soldiers had started entering the town, and they were skirmishing north of the River Mersey with the Cheshire militia. So even though I've just drawn some red dots here representing the Royalist Advance Party, you would have also had some of the Cheshire militia in these buildings and in these streets firing at them as they started to come down. So there is a firefight going on here. So there's musketeers firing in the alleyways, in the streets, and also from the buildings. Most of the civilian population either stayed indoors or actually got out the way altogether, which is the normal thing to do, especially with the news of an approaching Scottish invading army. A lot of people did flee and hope their town would still be standing at the end of the day. So there's a small engagement around about midday in here. Lambert sat watching the gun smoke appear in the town, and then the Cheshire militia withdraws across the bridge, and it is said that they started to dismantle the bridge. So they tried to dismantle the bridge, destroy the bridge, which would also hold up the royalist advance. Now, in modern days, we don't really take into account the importance of bridges, really. However, if you live in Worcestershire and we get a lot of flooding, and for example, the flooding in the past has prevented any traffic going over the main river bridge, it really shows the importance of bridges. And what you have to remember is back in the 17th century, there were less bridges. Now, if you think of Warrington, there's one bridge here. Today, there are several bridges crossing the River Mersey at that point. So at the time, if this bridge is dismantled, there is a long journey that people will have to go on to get round, basically, to cross that water. And what you have to remember, this is quite a dangerous river, really, as many of them were years ago. So there's a firefight in Warrington itself, and obviously the Cheshire militia is withdrawn, and they've consolidated on the south bank of the river, and they've started to dismantle the bridge. We know that they didn't do too much damage to that bridge because there is fighting on that bridge, probably with club muskets, maybe a few pikemen. But what you have to remember is the advance party is predominantly a musketeer force. But as the hours drew on, so after about an hour and a half, more Scottish troops started to come into the town, and these would have been your main troops, your pikemen, your musketeers. And you have to remember there was also some cavalry within that force under the command of Leslie. So they're starting to trickle in, and the Cheshire militia, amazingly, on the 16th of August 1651, put up quite a good fight for a good 2 hours. Some people say an hour and a half, but it's more likely to be 2 hours maximum, really. And then they started to retreat. Now, when they came back, they met with Lambert, and they reported that the entire Royalist army was coming down that road. The bridge was still passable, and therefore, unless more militias turn up, this force here, the Cheshire militia in Lambert's force of 4,000 cavalry, were going to be taking on a big force of about 10,000 men. So obviously they were not really going to stand a chance on their own on this bank into Cheshire. So what they decide to do, Lambert and the Cheshire militia finally leaves Warrington, and they actually move to the east. So they actually pull back and they start moving around to the east. News does reach Oliver Cromwell, and Oliver Cromwell is a little angry because of what's going on here. What you have to remember is Cromwell's New Model Army, or shall we say the Parliament Army generally, are still only, in this area anyway, still only around about 10 or 11,000 strong. And we think that Oliver Cromwell only wanted to engage with the Royalist forces when he knew he would get an outright victory, because this, or maybe later on, wouldn't be good enough. 10,000 either side, for example, probably wouldn't bring about a decisive victory. Maybe the Royalists could win it as well. So Cromwell wanted to make sure that his army was much bigger to engage them in a big battle. So what you have to remember about the 16th of August is there is the first decisive or first engagement of the Worcester Campaign. And it sounds odd, but amazingly, this is technically, or the Royalists would think so anyway, a Royalist victory. And Charles's army spent the night of the 16th of August and into the 17th of August actually celebrating a great victory. But saying that, there was a lot of commanders within this army that was pretty much saying it's not an outright victory. There was a small force of parliamentarians and they withdrew tactically. So at the end of the day, this may be technically seen as a royalist victory, but not quite. Historians now debate the Battle of Warrington. Some people say it was planned. Lambert specifically wanted to give the royalists the morale boost because they had heard news that a lot of royalists were starting to desert, for example. So maybe the royalist army were getting fed up on this march south, and the best way to encourage them to continue is to give them a victory. Maybe it was. Maybe the idea was there should be a skirmish and then a fake retreat by Lambert and the Cheshire militia. That could have been why this battle was fought. But if that was the case, Cromwell was not very happy because this is not the battle that he wanted. He wants a big battle where his army will outnumber that of the royalists. So we will never really know. And that's the interesting thing about history. In some cases, like the Battle of Warrington, it's quite sketchy what actually happened. The more you read about it, the more you get conflicting evidence. And you find that with history, especially when it comes to military history and things like that. So this becomes technically the only victory of the Worcester Campaign for the Royalist forces, fought on the 16th of August 1651, lasting about 2 to 3 hours, if that really, leaving the parliamentarians retreating and the royalists having a short celebration and continuing this march south. Anyway, on that note, hopefully you've had a fantastic weekend. The start of another week starts tomorrow, and remember, these videos are going to continue up to and including the Battle of Worcester on the 3rd of September 1651. So on that note, stay safe and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.